Thank you so much for joining me today. I want to take you on a journey today as we prepare to talk about now faith. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eric Little. I'm the pastor of Restoration Epicenter Church, and I want to make an impression in your life today, because we're living in a time where for some they're in a land or in opportunities. They have a land and opportunities that afford them the opportunity to have plenty. And then there are some people who are still processing through having lack or not having enough. And I want you to know that the difference between where you are and where you want to be is right now. Something called now. Every person that's watching me right now, you are in need of a now. And I'm not just trying to preach to you right now, but I want to teach you something that you and I, all of us, every person watching me, every person breathing, you are in a need, and you've been pressing for something to come into right now in your life. Some people are looking for a breakthrough in their finances. But are they looking for it tomorrow? Are they looking for it one day? And that's one problem that I have with what I'm talking about today, is that some people are waiting on one day instead of looking forward toward an expectation for right now. But my point is, all of us are waiting on a now. But the thing that's holding up the now that we all look forward to so desperately is something called faith. The Bible teaches us that now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Now faith. And I want to show you an example of what now faith looks like. And as we progress through today's time that I will share with you on the topic of now faith, I want to give you a chance to see it in action. And when I come back, then we're going to walk through this, and all of us will be made better by the end of our time we spend together. Please grab a pen and a pad and get ready to go on this journey with me. And I challenge you, you are going to be more full of faith and more ready to act on faith and more ready to move into your now, what you've been waiting on to come one day, because you're going to get this principle called faith. Stay with me and watch this right here.
Its roots may grow old in the ground and its stump die in the soil. Yet, at the scent of water, it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant.
My husband had passed, and my son and I were left in one of the driest and darkest seasons of our entire lives. The earth was hard and cracked, and I was hungry and thirsty again. I was at the city gates, gathering sticks, when I heard a man's voice ask me for a drink of water. As I looked up, I could see by this man's dress that he was an Israelite prophet. Now, I thought it was strange that he would ask me for a drink of water. Couldn't he tell by my dress that I was a widow? And widows aren't usually the first ones you ask for help. I agreed to get him his water, and as I was on my way, he called to me again and asked me to please bring him a piece of bread. Now, why was this man deliberately overlooking my circumstances? As surely as the Lord, your God, lives, I said to him, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. Don't be afraid, he said to me. First go, and make me a small cake of bread from what you have and bring it back to me. For the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not be dried up, until the Lord sends rain on the land. Something about his words made me believe him. And so I did what he told me to do, and he was right. There was enough food every day for me, my son, and the prophet Elijah. Sometime later, my son got sick and died. I remember being so angry. "Is this why you came?" I said to Elijah. "To remind me of my sin?" "Give me your son," Elijah said. And he carried the boy off to his room, and he prayed. At that moment, fear and guilt and condemnation flooded my soul until all hope had left me. And once again, when it seemed all was gone, was precisely when I received my miracle. For Elijah had given me back my son, alive. I can tell you that it wasn't easy for me to give all I had. First my flour and my oil, and later my son. For the times in the desert cannot be denied. There is dust and there is heat. There is sweat and there are tears. But it was in that season that I came to this understanding that the little in my hands will remain little if it stays in my hands. Placing your lack into God's hands supernaturally ushers in the miraculous. For nothing happens in our lives without God's sovereign purpose and permission. When we lose hope, it's not because God has forgotten about us. It's because of our inability to understand the divine orchestration of every event. So when you are on your very last, when the pantry is bare and your soul is cracked and dry, when death darkens your door and all of heaven is silent, you must remember this, that a bruised reed God will not break, and a smoldering wick He will not snuff out. For God's love is so great, we are not consumed. His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Sometimes we don't have enough faith to believe for our daily bread. And sometimes that's exactly the amount of space God needs to bring forth life once again.
Now, wasn't that something to behold? a widow, the widow of Zarephath, a woman that had so much need in her life. But in order for her to get what she needed in her now, she had to act on faith now. See, faith without works is dead. And I want to walk you through that story real quick. I want to give you a scripture reference for what we just watched, because I want you to go back and I want you to study it this week. I want you to study how that widow put her faith into action, and it brought what she needed into her life into the now. Now I want to say this before I go to where I was going to go. Do you know that heaven, do you know that God and the atmosphere that he operates in is fueled by many things, but I want to point out two things that it's fueled by: faith and obedience. In the coming days, some of you right now as I'm speaking to you, there is something that you're waiting for. There's something that God's ready to move you into, but you have not been activating your faith for now. There's something he's asking and he's waiting for you to move in right now as an act of faith that will release out of the eternal realm, out of the unseen realm, into your right now situation or circumstance. Now this is not, now faith is not a get me out of this situation formula. This is a formula, or and I won't say a formula, but this is a principle that we're supposed to live by, because the Bible teaches us that faith without works is dead, and also without faith it's impossible to please God. And so I wanted you to see that widow, because that widow was faith in action. That widow, what she needed was released into her life when she acted out of her need, acted out of her lack right now. Because faith will always, God's best for you will always be on the tip or on the very crux of something that he calls you to move out into faith to do. You move out in faith, you do it, and then his hand or his manifestation comes into your life as you move out in faith. Now there are some manifestations that take time, but there are some that are only released by now faith. And I want us to understand that principle. Now I want you to take your Bible and I want you to turn to 1 Kings chapter 17, and we're going to read verses 7 through 6. Now I'm going to read a little bit of it, but I want you to study it this week, okay? Because it's going to strengthen you, make you stronger. Verse 7 says, "Sometime later the brook dried up, because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him," which was Elijah, "and he got up at once." He told him, the word says, "Get up at once and go to Zarephath in a region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food." So he went to Zarephath, and when he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "What you bring? Would you bring me a little water in a jar so that I may have a drink?" And as she was going to get it, he called back out to her and said, Hey, bring me a piece of bread as well." Now, I want to stop right there. We're going to stop right there, but we're going to keep going. But I want you to understand something. It's that God was concerned about the faith that he needed to see activated in her right now. Have you ever been in a situation where you needed something and you were in need of something, and the person you was asking, or the person that you was going to, or someone came to you at a time where you needed something and they asked you for something, and you say, "Oh man, they tripping. What I need right now, why in the world am I going to give you something when I need something?" Because that requires faith. And some of you this week, some of you right now, you need something. You need a manifestation of God in your life. You need something that God is ready to move into your life. He's ready to move you into a new season. And I'm not just trying to to sound spiritual and put you through this spiritual jargon and spiritual rigmarole, as they would say back in the day. I'm not trying to put you through spiritual calisthenics. I'm teaching you a principle that faith moves heaven and earth. And you have to decide whether you're going to be a person that lives by faith or that lives by sight. The Bible teaches us that we should live by faith and not by sight. And so this widow was being challenged not to focus on her situation, but to focus on what she needed, God needed from her at this time. And some of you who are watching me right now, God needs something from you right now, and it's called faith. But the Bible teaches us that faith without works is dead, so you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to do something just like this widow had to do something. Elijah said to her in verse 13, "Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make me a small loaf of bread for me, and what you have, bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son." Now, I skipped over verse 12. In verse 12, she was stating, all I have is just this little bit of meal and a little bit of oil. And I had planned, as I was gathering sticks, to just make me a cake and my son a cake, to eat it and to die. And based on her situation, God sent a situation in her life that was going to compel her either to move out in faith or to recess back into her situation and die. And God don't want you to die. That's why he's sending this message to you right now. He wants you to live. You are not defined by situations and circumstances that you may face. You're not defined by the season that you're moving out of or you're moving into. What you'll be defined by is faith. Faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. You've got to begin, if you're going to be a true follower of Christ, you've got to be someone that lives by faith. See, everybody wants to have a relationship with God and they just want things to just happen in their life. There's some people watching me right now that you've been totally disenfranchised by this whole message on faith, name it and claim it. But no, you, like myself and like all of us, we've got to come into the understanding that there's some things that will not happen until you do something. And that do something is called now faith. And I had to highlight this widow because she embodied the very example that so many people, especially in this day and time, are faced with. Their situations and circumstances, and most people hide behind their situations and circumstances, and some of you have been hiding behind your situation and your circumstances, and situations and circumstances are going to happen always in our life, but what can never change is your faith. See, I'm going to give you this example. I'm going through a season right now in my life where God had been nudging me, giving me gentle nudgings about stepping out and moving into a greater level of my purpose or my destiny as a man that's been called to touch people and a man that's been called to do what I'm doing right now, to put forth information that will help build people near and far. But I have been troubled because even stepping out to start the ministry that I'm leading, I worked full time. And I tried to undertake, leading and developing Restoration Epicenter Church. And I did that for 2 years. But after my 2-year mark, coming toward the end of my 2-year mark, the Lord said, Eric, I need you to step away. I need you to step away from depending on a job. And I want you to take what I've put in your hands, your gifts and your talents, your abilities, your entrepreneurial things that you've just kind of been sitting on. I want you to take those things and I want you to step out by faith. Now, a man that, is married and has responsibility, that requires faith. But this is the example God gave me for me, but I want to also give it to you. A bird perches in a nest and it waits. The baby birds wait for the mom to come back. or the dad of that matter, and to give them food that they stepped out of the nest that morning, not knowing if they'd ever find. And the Bible teaches us here, the Bible teaches us that birds, they don't even know if, whether or not they're going to even have food or not, because they don't sow and they don't reap. And see, this is listed in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 through 34. Grab your Bible, turn with me, because I want you to read along as I go here. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 through 34. It reads in verse 19, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on the earth, where moth and where animals destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin will not destroy, where thieves will not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The eyes is a lamp to the body. And if you are healthy, your whole body is full of light. But if you are unhealthy, the whole body is full of darkness. And what will destroy the whole body is if you have a mind to look at situations without faith, you will be unstable. You will be uneasy. You will be one of the hardest people to be around and to follow. But take on this example as we move down to verse 25 in Matthew chapter 6. Verse 25 says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life and what you will eat, or about your body and what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more important and more valuable than the bird?" And so in that analogy, the Lord had begun to speak to me just like he's speaking to you right now. And that bird, every morning when it leaves the nest not knowing where its provision is going to come from. But it's one thing that makes that bird different than me. That's one principle that bird uses, and birds all over this world use, that as human beings we don't use. And it's now faith. They could sit in that nest hoping for something to fall into the nest, hoping for what they need to just land in their lap. Or they could step out, flap their wings, and take off, activating their faith now. And when they do that, the Lord is compelled to move on their behalf because they've put their faith into action. Because it teaches us that the faith without works is dead. And so you can be a person that say, "Oh, I have great faith. I have great faith in God." Well, if you have faith in God, it did not come without being tested. All faith will be tested. And most of the time, some of the biggest victories in my life happened when I moved out into now faith. Now faith. And I believe on all the things that have happened in my life, I let that lead me into this last major decision I made in my life. I'll give you another instance where I activated now faith as I'm talking about. In 1997, I was moving into my sophomore year in college in Atlanta, Georgia. Morris Brown College to be exact, for all my Brown Knights. What's up? And I found myself in a very tough situation because in college, I didn't have a whole lot of money. I didn't come from a rich family. I was in college on student loans alone. And I had never really worked a job because I played sports all through high school. And in college, I just worked. I just went to school. I didn't work. So 19, 20 years old, I still had never, really got out into the workforce. All I knew to do was to be a student. And so I came toward the end of my first semester, my sophomore year, and I received a check for $1,684.32. Now, you may ask yourself, how in the world do you remember that all these years? Because it came at a time where I had very little. I had very little clothing. I didn't have books. I was struggling to make it through that semester I didn't have a meal plan. And so it was many different things that I could have done with that $1,864. I'm sorry, $1,864.34 that I could have used with it. It was the most money that I had ever had in my possession that was mine my entire life. And I was moving into a gathering at my church in Atlanta, and my pastor was talking about first fruit offering. Now, this is not a message. I'm not leading into a first fruit offering anything. I'm just telling you my story, or my now faith story. And so when he was teaching about the first fruit, how the first fruit, when you give God the first fruit, how it covers the whole lump, and it creates an opportunity for God to continue to sustain you, even though what you have, you don't know. When you give a first fruit, that means when the fruit for a farmer, when their first harvest comes in, they gave a first fruit, not knowing how the rest of the harvest was going to be, but they had faith that as I honor God with this first fruit, the rest of the year is going to be covered, because I stepped out in faith and I trusted God as my provider and as my source. And so as I began to get an understanding as my pastor was teaching, I was thinking, well, I have a lot of needs in my life, and I want to sow a little offering from this check. But I didn't have a bank account. That's horrible to say. I'm sad to say that at 20 years old, I didn't have a bank account. So I couldn't cash the check. And I couldn't figure out, why would God give me this money if I can't cash the check to spend it? The whole purpose was to challenge my faith. I wanted to give an offering, and the Lord, I didn't really know how to hear God's voice, but I know I felt something on the inside of me say, give the entire check in that offering as a first fruit offering. Give the whole thing. And I was thinking to myself, man, I ain't giving the whole thing. Man, the devil, God, whoever this is talking, you tripping. I ain't giving the whole check. I'm not doing that. This $1,864.32. I am not going to give this up. And the Lord just kept pressing on me for, as the teaching went forth, to give the whole check. So I wrote my name on the back of the check, and I put it into the offering. And I watched that offering plate as it went. I watched it. And I wanted to get up and I wanted to run to the usher and say, give me my check back. But I didn't. I let it go. But I'm going to tell you something. I moved in now faith. And everything that I needed, it manifested for me. I needed books. All my books was taken care of. I needed more clothing. All of my clothing was taken care of. I needed somewhere to stay. I needed a meal plan. I was able to, someone stepped up and provided me the money to pay my college so that I could have a meal plan. And I got a dorm. I was sleeping on people's floors because I didn't have enough financial aid to cover my expenses for living in the dorm. And I also got that covered. And everything that I needed was manifested, and it did not manifest until I moved in now faith. That was something God was requiring of me now. Now, for some of you watching me right now, that moment that God's going to demand something for you might not be today, but it might be tomorrow. It might be next week. It might be next month. But it's coming, and God wants you to pass the test. So he's allowing you, and those of you who are part of Restoration Epicenter Church that are watching me right now, that he's allowing you to hear it so that you will pass the test. Pass the test. I got so much things happened to me when I stepped out in that one act. Someone told me this when I was coming up and being discipled early in my relationship with God, that if you have a need, but what you have is not enough to meet that need, then it's a seed. It's a seed for you to demonstrate now faith toward God. And for some of you, you have a need and you have money, you have things, but you don't have enough to supply all of what you need. I challenge you to find a way to sow that seed to God or sow it into something, and you allow God to move on your behalf to put that seed back into you. Now, for some of you, it may be your local church. If you're a part of a local church, I challenge you to do what the widow did and take from what it is that you have so little of and sow it in the name of God. Don't be distracted by man. This is not about me trying to get you to give anything to a man or trying to manipulate you. I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm trying to teach you how to step into now faith. If you're part of a local church, take a little bit of that seed and sow it in an offering toward God. Sow it. You have not, because you don't sow. You have to sow in order to get a harvest. Now, this message is not about giving, but I'm just speaking right now prophetically that there are some of you who need to sow a seed into someone, sow a seed into, to God through an offering at a local church, your church. And for some of you, God might even be telling you to sow a seed into my ministry. I don't know what God is saying to you, but whatever he tells you to do, do it. If he tells you to find someone, if he puts a person in your mind right now and say, sow that person's need right now, even though you have lack, even though you need, it's only a setup for your now faith. If he says sow into Restoration Epicenter Church, the man that's giving you the word, just as she sowed into Elijah, sow into the man that's giving you the word right now. Sow into go to his website and sow into his ministry. If he tells you to do it, do it. If he tells you to go to your church this Sunday, or go to a local church, you've not been in one before, and sow into a local church, do it. If he tells you to take something that belongs to you and give it to someone else, whatever he tells you to do to challenge your now faith, do it. Do it. If he tells you to go into your job and to buy lunch for the whole job and you have a need for something, whatever he tells you to do is to test your now faith, to test you. There's not ever been a time that I've needed God to move into my life and he didn't challenge me to do something now. Now, like I said, I'm not trying to manipulate you or anything like that. But there are things you're waiting for that requires you to move out in faith now. Not tomorrow, not the next day. Now faith is now. You've been waiting for something too long. You've been waiting for your day to come. You've been waiting for this to happen and waiting for that to happen. And you've been praying for healing and deliverance. But there is something God is waiting for you to do now so that his manifestation can come in your life. You have to move by faith. And you have to move by faith now. Don't be like a bird. Take the lesson from the bird. Get out the nest and take off. Try. Do something with what you've been thinking. Some of you, I'm speaking to some people right now. You've been thinking about a business. You've been thinking about an opportunity. You've been thinking about writing a book. You've been thinking about starting a business. You've been thinking about moving out into a new career. But all you've been doing is sitting in the nest. And you've just been waiting for something to happen, then for you to move. But the Lord says, move by faith now. And when you do it, I will manifest what you need along the way. You've been worried about stuff you don't have right now. Just keep your faith in God. Keep your faith in God. And I'm going to say this right now for someone. This is for an athlete, professional athlete, or someone who has wealth. You've been sowing into charities because you've been afraid to sow into the house of God. You've been afraid to sow into a house, into a church. Let me tell you something. A charity, these things are great. These things are good. But your tithe and your offering and your seeds, that needs to come to God. When you give a seed to a local church, you're not giving to a man. You're giving to God, and your seed is not, God is not looking at your seed as money. God can't use your money. He's the creator of all things. He's not concerned about your money. He's concerned about your faith. Your money is your faith. Everything that we use to move and to have our being is tied to our faith. You go to work and you exercise faith to work, believing that at the end of the week or the end of the 2 weeks that you're going to get a paycheck. So when you get that paycheck is faith manifested. You had faith that they were going to fulfill their commitment to you and give you what you needed at the end of the week. And so when you give the seed to God, you're giving him your faith. And for some of you guys and you women that are in high profile positions, you're in professional careers, and you have a lot of stuff, a lot of resources hit your hand, but you still in need of things. And you ask yourself, why is it that I have more money than the average American, but I still have all these needs in my life? I have emotional needs. I have spiritual needs. I have relational needs. I just have fancy clothes. I have nice cars. I have a nice house, but I'm broke because all my money goes to sustaining this stuff and sustaining these things that look good on the outside and have people thinking that I have it going on, but I'm really dying inside. I really don't have all that I really say I have. I really think I have, and most people think I have. It's because you are not exercising faith in God. You are becoming a God. You are becoming a God because you are relying on your own resources and your own skills and abilities to be your source. But you have never been entitled, whether you're rich or whether you're poor. God is God of all. And right now you have to put God in his right position in your life. And regardless of whether you have lots or little, he's still your source. And he still requires from all of us the same. For us to live by faith and not by sight. Because of your lack of faith and trust, you've stopped sowing into God. You stopped sowing. You've been doing God-like things, but you haven't exercised faith and putting your money into the hand, into the house of God. And God is saying, now this is going to require now faith for you. Stop going to your local church and receiving from the pastor, but not sowing. Sow into the house of the Lord. Sow. Keep sowing into the nonprofit organizations and things of that nature. But you've got to start giving tithe and offering and sowing into your local church, because that is where you empower. You're putting your seed to empower the work of God. And you're also putting your faith in God to give him that seed, to give him that tithe and that offering. That's what God requires of you. And for some that shoe fits, then you wear it, because that's your now faith moment. Some very important things, business deals and things that you've been waiting to break, and they won't break and come into your now because you have been waiting for the word. You've been giving and so into all these different things. But this thing right here is tough. This is the thing you fear. This is the thing you run from. But it's the very thing that you must do if your now is going to be activated. I had to say that because that was something that was geared towards some specific people that fall in the area of what I just spoke. And if it's you, if the shoe fits, wear it. If it's not you, hey, don't sweat it. Don't get all bent out of shape because I'm talking about, in that moment I was talking about money. But you just stay obedient to what God is telling you to do. Now I want you to continue to follow along with me. Mark chapter 11, verse 22, it says, this is Mark chapter 11, verse 22 through 24. It says, and Jesus answering said unto them, have faith in God. Let me read that again. Mark chapter 11, verse 22, it says, and Jesus answering said unto them, have faith in God. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto the mountain, be removed, and be cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in their heart, but shall believe those things which it saith shall come to pass, whatever he asks for, he shall receive it. Verse 24. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever you desire when you pray, believe that you receive, and you shall have them. Believe is talking about your faith. See, you've been praying and you've been pursuing God for some things, but you have no faith. I can think of things that I have asked for, things I've prayed for, and as I was praying, I had no faith that it was going to happen. I had no faith that it was going to happen, and it didn't happen. Just recently, I had a chance to pray for a woman with stage 4 cancer. Unbelievable moment that lifted my faith. Because I was praying for her. I wanted to pray for her at a distance, and the Lord put it on my heart to go to her house and to lay my hands on her. And when I went to her and asked her if I could pray for her, it was a bunch of her family members standing around. And she asked, well, can we go in the room so you can pray for me? And I said, no. We're not going to go in the room. We're going to pray right now. We're going to pray right now in front of these people. And as a matter of fact, I want us to touch and agree. And I prayed over her, and I spoke to cancer, and I commanded by the authority of Christ, not my authority. As I was praying for her, she began to weep. And as she began to weep, I continued to say to her, God is going to do this thing. As you stepped out in faith, and as we stepped out in faith and believed God at his word, that he says, if there are any sick among us, let us bring them to the elders and let them lay their hands on them, that they might be made whole. The fact, in the moment that I decided to stop just praying for her at a distance, but to move into now faith, to take my hand as a point of contact and put it on her, I was saying, God, we are activating a need for this to happen in her life right now. And that required faith. I'm not going to tell you that I didn't have a little bit of doubt as I was going over there. But at that moment, I said, I'm going to step out in faith. What if she's not healed? What happens when if I lay my hands on her and she's not healed? What happens if I lay my hands on her and she gets worse? Well, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And if God put the situation in my presence for me to act on it, it's because he's wanting to manifest. And I believed that it was for her healing. And in 2 weeks, I got a phone call. My wife got a phone call, and she spoke to me, and she said, Eric, my cousin called me. She said she went to the doctor, and the doctor began to examine her as she was preparing for another stage, another level of chemotherapy. And as she was being monitored and looked at, the doctor was totally appalled. He could not believe that what he was seeing was actually there, because she had cancer all over her body in many places that he had seen before. And he told her, I don't know what happened. I don't know what to say, but it's cancer that was in places are not even, there is no traces of cancer in certain parts of your body. It's only two places in your body that I still see a hint of cancer. But even there, it's not growing. It's not branching out and building. So cancer is leaving your body, and I can explain it's now faith. Faith. It's faith and an action that moved God in her situation. It wasn't Pastor Eric. It wasn't me. It was my faith and her faith in God, and us being willing to do what he was telling us to do in that moment. God is going to begin to tell you some things to do. Some of you, he's telling you things to do right now as you're listening to me. Move on it. Do it. Step out. Faith is just like breathing. If you're a believer that desires to grow in God, you can't grow in God without faith. You can't. Faith is something that we all have to move in. It's not something that we can escape. I want you to think about this. I want you to also take this, and I want you to study this week. I want you to, just for a reference, I want you to write down Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. I want you to read the whole book of Hebrews chapter 11, okay? So that's an assignment I want to give you. I want you to study to show yourself approved as it relates to that. And I also want you to take James chapter 2, verses 14 through 26. And I want you to study it this week. I want you to take some time to look at it. And I'm going to read a little bit of that for your hearing. This is James chapter 2, verse 14 through 26. It says, faith without works is dead. Faith without works, without some action, it is dead. Check this out. For what does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or a sister is naked and destitute on a daily basis, and they need food, and one of you say to them, depart from me in peace, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? What does it profit for a person to come to you and God create a situation for you to move on now? And you put it off and you pray for them, or you just, well, no, I don't have it. And you let that person leave when you know you have the money. You just don't want to use it toward what that need presented, and you missed your now faith moment. But let's continue to read. So what does it profit? Verse 17. Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, it is dead. You can't say you have faith that God is going to provide for you, but you don't sow a seed. You don't give. You don't tithe. You don't do things that move God into a position to release a harvest into your life. You can't say you have faith but not put works to it. You can't say you have faith that God is going to move you into a new career, but you not start taking steps to move in that direction. You can't say I have faith that God's going to make our marriage better, but you're not doing anything to help bring that faith into work in your life. You can't continue to say I have faith that everything is going to work out, but you've got to figure out what is the work God has called you to put your hands to in faith. What has he called you to do in that relationship where he's telling you to stay and hold on? He's telling you to love that person. And that person is not treating you like you know you need to be treated. But by faith, God is saying, keep doing what I'm telling you to do. You can't say that you have faith that God's going to work a miracle, work things out in a situation if you just throw your hands up and you quit. Don't be a quitter. Keep pressing forward. I don't care what it looks like. You keep moving forward. I don't care what you're dealing with right now. Keep moving by faith. Keep moving by faith, because that is going to be the key to your manifestation, to what you need in your life. It's time out for me telling you that God is going to work everything out, but you have to do nothing. Au contraire, you have to be obedient. I told you earlier that there are two things that move God: faith and obedience. What is he telling you to do? What has he been speaking to you about? What is he speaking to you about right now? Yeah, I know it requires faith. There's some things that's being presented to you now that require faith and obedience. There's some things that's going to present themselves to you soon. This word is coming as a precursor to help you be prepared for. Faith and obedience is necessary for what you need in your now to manifest. So please don't miss this test. Don't miss this test. Don't miss this test. Well, I know that for some of us, this message on faith is not something that is so easily accepted, because you've tried and you've tried and you've tried these things that you've heard ministered on television, you've heard. But I'm going to tell you something. It doesn't matter how many times you have stepped out, how many times that you've had to exercise faith, you do it. How many times, it doesn't matter how many times you got on your bike and you fell off when you were trying in the beginning. Doesn't matter how many times you had an accident on that bike, you still got up on the bike and you exercised faith. And you exercised faith. And you exercised faith into what was needed for you to learn and what was needed for you to experience. It happened. Doesn't matter. That widow that was in the widow of Zarephath, she was going through a season of famine, of lack. It was obvious that she needed help, but she still was presented with a now faith opportunity. It doesn't matter your situation or your circumstance, whether you're rich or poor. God is looking for you to exercise faith now. He's looking for you to exercise faith now. I'm reminded of the young ruler. The Bible teaches that Jesus was presented with a question by a young ruler, as that young ruler came to Jesus by night. And he told him, I want to be a part of what you're doing, Jesus. I want to go with you where you're going. I want to follow you. And Jesus says to him, you want to follow me? Sell everything that you have, give it to the poor, and then come back and follow me. And that young ruler turned away in shame, and he never came back, because Christ was challenging him with a now faith moment. He wanted to know if what he had was more valuable than a relationship with God. Because he foreknew that that young ruler was going to be tested on every level. And if his desire was more for the things, he would never be a good soldier for Christ. He would never be a true disciple. Because Jesus said, in this life you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, because I've already overcome the world. I've already overcome it. And so there are things, as with that young ruler, God had already created a plan for him to be sustained. But God always tests us to see where our loyalty lies, where our faith lies. See, his faith lied in his treasure. And so God could never use him because his faith was tied to what he could hold in his hand. And for some people that I've spoken to today, you are a person of great wealth. You're a person of great resources. And your biggest problem, you want to grow in your relationship with God, but you're too attached to the things. And God is going to start telling you things to do that's going to require you loosing and releasing some of the things that you hold on to. And then I'm also, as I bring this time together to a close, talking to people who are average. When I say average, meaning that you have enough, but you don't have more than enough. And I'm also talking to people who have very little and you need more. It doesn't matter where you are. You have to move by faith. All of you, whatever level that you fall in, if you're going to be a true follower of Christ, you cannot skip over now faith. You mark my word, when you move out in now faith and you be obedient, remember, faith and obedience. You move out in faith and you remain obedient to what God tells you. You're going to see the things that you need for now begin to manifest. See, that's the thing that you've been missing. You've been missing the now faith, the movement in faith. And guess what? For some of us, it'll be big things. For some of us, it'll be small things. But it's going to build you in your relationship with God. The stories that I shared with you early on about how I had to move out into now faith moments. I prayed for the lady and she began to get healed. I stepped out and I gave that $1,864.34, and God began to provide for me. All of those things built my faith, even into the last major thing that I've had to do in my life, even now in this new season. There will never be a season that you go into or you come out of that God won't require of you as a follower of Christ. Now faith. So I challenge you to don't be afraid to do what needs to be done so that God can manifest what he needs to in your life. This is Pastor Eric Little. I've enjoyed spending this time with you, edifying you, building you up. I just want to challenge you to continue to study the things that I have shared with you to study, even the scriptures that I've come across the screen, even as I've been teaching. Study them so that you will be shown to be faithful. And I want to also challenge you this last thing. I want you to take some time and I want you to read up on the a story of not of Elijah, but Abraham and Isaac. Because some of you that are watching me right now, you're going to have an Abraham and Isaac moment where God is going to ask of you the thing that you love the most. He's going to begin to ask you to give him control in it. He's going to begin to ask you by faith for you to give it to him, for you to begin to lay it down so that his work can begin in your life. Because until you lay down everything that you hope for and you begin to give your life as a ransom to God and say, whatever you want, God, is what I want, then you'll begin to live. So I challenge you to read the story of Abraham and Isaac so that you can be strengthened in your faith for what's coming in the future for you. Don't be afraid to sow and to do the things I told you, okay? God bless you. You make this day great and continue to grow and grow until God's working plan comes into full manifestation in your life. God bless.